Laudetur Jesus Christus. Vatican and World News.
In the headlines this Thursday, February 11th, Pope Francis calls for a relationship based on solidarity and trust between the sick and those who care for them as we mark the World Day of the Sick.
The United Nations decries disparity in vaccine distribution.
And we go down memory lane today as Vatican Radio prepares to celebrate its 90th anniversary on Friday. In the Vatican, I'm Father Benedict Mayaki.
And I'm Francesca Merlo. Today is the 29th World Day of the Sick. Every year, 11th of February is set aside as a day to offer prayers for those suffering from illnesses and for those who provide them with assistance and care both in healthcare institutions and within families and communities. It also coincides with the liturgical memorial of Our Lady of Lourdes. As Linda Bordoni reports, Pope Francis urges a path of healing grounding in a trusting and interpersonal relationship between the sick and those who care for them.
In his message for the annual observance issued in January, Pope Francis encouraged a trust-based relationship in care for the sick. For a therapy to be effective, the Pope pointed out, it must be relational as it enables a holistic approach to the patient. He noted that Jesus healed the sick not by magic, but as the result of an encounter and an interpersonal relationship. The Pope underlined that sickness makes us realize our own vulnerability and our innate need of others. It also raises the question of life's meaning, which we bring before God in faith in order to seek a new and deeper direction in our lives. In light of the current health crisis, the Pope pointed out that the COVID-19 pandemic has exacerbated inequalities in our healthcare systems and exposed inefficiencies in the care of the sick and the elderly. He lamented that weak and vulnerable people are not always granted access to care or in an equitable manner. He, however, noted the dedication and generosity of healthcare personnel, of volunteers, support staff, priests, men and women religious during the pandemic. And he said that they are a silent multitude of men and women who chose not to look the other way, but to share the suffering of patients, whom they see as neighbours and members of our one human family. I'm Linda Bordoni.
Still in keeping with the World Day of the Sick, Cardinal Peter Turkson, the prefect of the Dicastery for Promoting Integral Human Development, spoke to Vatican News on Wednesday about the challenges with providing equal access to COVID-19 vaccines. Christopher Wells has the story.
In an interview with Vatican News, Cardinal Peter Turkson, the prefect of the Dicastery for Promoting Integral Human Development, emphasized the importance of facilitating access to COVID-19 vaccines through production in developing nations. The Cardinal observed that many poor countries do not have the capacity to produce the COVID-19 vaccines, and as such, depend on vaccines from more developed countries such as India, Russia, and China, which sometimes come with doubts about their effectiveness and which are not accessible by all. At the same time, he noted that some other countries may have the capacity to produce the vaccines themselves, but are hindered by patents that grant exclusive rights to some, while precluding others from producing the vaccines in their own countries. Stressing that this imbalanced system of vaccine production is no longer sustainable, he urged developing countries not to restrict others from vaccine production through patents. The Cardinal went on to encourage everyone in this period of health emergency to lend a hand to those in need.
To anyone who is afflicted by COVID, there's the need for a hand, to reach out a hand to support, to help, and to lift up anybody. For those who have lost loved ones, there's also the need for the hand of consolation and solace to help them in their sorrow. In all situations, this is the period for lending a hand to anybody who is sorrowing, who's lost anybody, and who is dealing with this pandemic. Let's all learn to lend a hand in this situation.
I'm Christopher Wells.
Two United Nations bodies are decrying the unfair distribution of COVID-19 vaccines worldwide, warning it is a self-defeating strategy. The UN Children's Fund UNICEF and the World Health Organization WHO have denounced the disparity in a joint statement released on Wednesday. Robin Gomes tells us more.
Of the 128 million vaccine doses administered so far, more than 3/4 of those vaccinations are in just 10 countries that account for 60% of global GDP. As of today, almost 130 countries with 2.5 billion people are yet to administer a single dose, wrote UNICEF Executive Director Henrietta Fore and WHO Director General Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus in the joint press release. This self-defeating strategy, they warned, will cost lives and livelihoods, give the virus further opportunity to mutate and evade vaccines, and will undermine a global economic recovery. The two UN bodies that have been working together for more than 70 years called on leaders to look beyond their borders and employ a vaccine strategy that can actually end the pandemic and limit variants. COVAX, the abbreviation of COVID-19 vaccines global access, is a global initiative aimed at equitable access to COVID-19 vaccines led by the Global Alliance for Vaccines and Immunization, the WHO, the Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness Innovations, and others. UNICEF and WHO pointed out that COVAX participating countries are preparing to receive and use vaccines. Health workers have been trained, cold chain systems primed, but what is missing is the equitable supply of vaccines. To ensure that vaccine rollouts begin in all countries in the first 100 days of 2021, UNICEF and WHO want that governments that have vaccinated their own health workers and populations at higher risk of severe disease share vaccines through COVAX so other countries can do the same. We need global leadership to scale up vaccine production and achieve vaccine equity, the chiefs of the two agencies stressed. COVID-19 has shown that our fates are inextricably linked. Whether we win or lose, we will do so together, they stressed. I am Robin Gomes.
Argentine-Slovenian Lazarus missionary Father Pedro Opeka and his humanitarian association Akamasoa, or City of Friendship, have been nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize by the Prime Minister of Slovenia, Janez Janša. The nomination was announced on January the 31st on the official website of the Slovenian government. According to the Prime Minister, the Akamasoa community, which Father Opeka founded over 30 years ago and which Pope Francis visited in September of 2019 during his apostolic journey to Mozambique, Madagascar and Mauritius, has given an outstanding contribution to social and human development in Madagascar, helping it to achieve the 2030 UN Goals for Sustainable Development. During his visit to the Akamasoa City of Friendship on September 8, 2019, Pope Francis remarked that at its foundations is a living faith translated into concrete actions capable of moving mountains, and that its success shows that poverty is not inevitable.
And finally, to mark and to celebrate Vatican Radio's 90th birthday, celebrated on Friday the 12th of February, we look back to the radio's inauguration by Pope Pius XI and Guglielmo Marconi in 1931. In this program, presented and produced by Veronica Skersbrick, you can hear a sound picture of that special day with the voices of this Pope, of Marconi and his daughter Elettra, as well as the crackly sound of that very first historic broadcast.
In the tiny Vatican state, from a great radio station built by Marconi, the Pope, for the first time in 1900 years of Catholicism, has sent his voice throughout the world.
That was the voice of Pius XI at the inauguration of Vatican City's radio station on February the 12th, 1931.
Primi in loco ipso.
Ho l'altissimo onore di annunziare che fra pochi istanti.
The words of Pius XI followed those of the father of radio, Guglielmo Marconi. While Pius XI spoke in Latin, the universal language of the Church, Marconi spoke in Italian. For the first time in history, the voice of a Roman pontiff is about to be carried through the airwaves, for all people to hear, Marconi said.
La sua viva voce può essere percepita.
My father made friends with the Pope, who was Pius XI. In front of my mother, he asked my father to build important radio station in the Vatican City. He accepted with enthusiasm. And that was
Princess Elettra, Marconi's daughter, was named after her father's invention. She recalled playing in the Vatican gardens while her father discussed electric waves with Pius XI. It was through the Vatican gardens, so familiar to Princess Elettra, that on a raw and windy evening Pius XI went by car to inaugurate the new radio station of Vatican City. His first gesture was to bless the city and the world. A year after the first papal broadcast on Vatican Radio, the BBC broadcast the first ever royal Christmas message.
Through one of the marvels of modern science, I am enabled this Christmas Day to speak to all my peoples that wireless should have...
His Majesty George V's voice reached out to his subjects throughout the empire.
I speak now from my home and from my heart to you all, to men and women so cut off by the snows, the desert, or the sea, that only voices out of the air can reach them. I wish a happy Christmas. God bless you.
Only a few months later, the words of the Pope to Marconi on Vatican Radio were filled with that same wonder. The Pope spoke of being baffled as to how Marconi had managed to transform into sound mysterious electric waves.
There is nothing to see, to hear, to feel, to touch, the Pope said. So how could the human mind possibly see what our eyes don't see?
In the tiny Vatican state, from a great radio station built by Marconi, the Pope, for the first time in 1900 years of Catholicism, has sent his voice throughout the world.
Thanks for listening. I'm Veronica Scaresbrick.
One final item. The bishops of England and Wales have welcomed the Leave Them Certain campaign launched by the NHS Blood and Transplant following a law change that has introduced an opt-out or deemed consent system for organ donation. As of May last year, organs and tissues of a deceased person can be automatically transplanted unless the person concerned has explicitly expressed the desire not to donate. The aim of the campaign is to ensure that the donation does not take place against the will of the deceased. That is why it is important for people to make their decision clear and to talk to their loved ones about organ donation before they die.
And that brings us to the end of this edition of Vatican World News. For more on these and other stories, and to hear this broadcast as a podcast, please be sure to visit our web portal at www.vaticannews.va.
You can also catch the latest updates on our Facebook page or on Twitter. Many thanks go to Patrizio Ciprari in studio. In the Vatican, I'm Father Benedict Mayaki.
And I'm Francesca Merlo.